I love Pixar stories, and one of the things I love most about them is the depth of storytelling they're able to achieve in what are essentially kid stories. Take Toy Story, for instance. If you watched Toy Story as a child, you probably think of it as a story about people who are really different learning to become friends and the value of friendship. But if you revisit it as a teenager or a young adult, you may see in that story, Toy Story, it's about learning what things from your childhood you need to let go of when you grow up and how to embrace new things and try new things. Maybe if you came back to it again as an adult, you would see it's a story about family dynamics and parent and child relationships and what it's like for a single mom to help a child grow and develop and navigate through all the pitfalls of life. And Toy Story and other movies like it are able to give us a great depth of storytelling and to teach us something at each different point in our life as we're looking for different things. We've been going through the book of Revelation, and I love the depth of storytelling in the book of Revelation. It uses highly symbolic language to teach us truths about the world. Sometimes they're things we know or we feel, but we really don't know the complexity or the depth of the things behind it. And Revelation is revealing things, telling us things, showing us things that God wants us to see about how the world works. Last week we looked at Revelation 4 and 5, and in these chapters, Jesus is the sacrificial lamb. And because of his self-sacrificing nature, he's the only one found worthy to open the royal seals that are holding scrolls shut from the king's hand. What comes next in the next several chapters are series of sets of 7 disturbing and devastating events. And there's a symbol attached to each one of these sets of 7. And when we get to the 7th in each of the series, it opens up another set of 7, starting the cycle over again. So each time we're shown sort of a picture of something, and then we're shown, oh no, there's more to it. We're going to peel back the next layer. So there's 7 royal seals on scrolls that need to be opened. There's 7 trumpets that need to be played. There's 7 bowls of liquid that need to be poured out. And 7 is often thought of as a number of completeness. So you think of it, there's like 7 days in a week. And when you've gone through the week, you start the cycle over again. And with each of these, what we're seeing is the cycle is being shown over again after we get to each of the ends, the 7 seals and the 7 trumpets, and then finally the 7 bowls. So let's start by looking at the royal seals that hold the scrolls shut that need to be opened. With each of the first scrolls that are opened, a horse and a rider come out. And sometimes these are called the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, but really they're just symbols about what's going on in the world. So the first horse that comes out is white. Its rider has a bow in his hand and a crown on his head. So this is really a rider that represents military and battle conquest and victory. The second one is red. The second horse is red, and it has a sword that has blood all over it. And this horse symbolizes bloodshed. The third horse that comes out is black, and its rider has a scale in its hand, and it's telling us that food's really expensive and hard to find. So basically, he represents famine or scarcity of resources. And the fourth one that comes out is pale, and he's not carrying anything, but his name is Death, and I think that kind of tells us everything we need to know about him. So these 4 seals, these 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, as sometimes they're called, they're not predictions about the future that's going to come. If you've ever studied world history, these are just the cycle of how the world works. Bloodshed, military conflict, scarcity of resources, and death is kind of the cycle that's just always gone on. And when we get to the 5th seal, the 5th royal seal on a scroll that needs to be opened, this is where we really find out what the 7 seals are about. Revelation chapter 6, verses 9 through 11. When the Lamb broke the 5th seal, I saw under the altar the souls of all who had been martyred for the word of the Lord, for being faithful to their testimony. They shouted to the Lord and said, "O sovereign Lord, holy and true, how long before you judge the people who belong to this world and avenge our blood for what they have done to us?" Then a white robe was given to each of them, and they were told to rest a little longer until the full number of their brothers and sisters, their fellow servants of Jesus who were being martyred, had joined them. See, this first set of devastating and disrupting events is really addressing the question, why do bad things happen to good people? More specifically, why do bad things happen to followers of Jesus? And so Jesus, who willingly self-sacrificed, who really died for other people, he was the only one who was found worthy to address this question, to open these seals, and to really let us know what's going on here. See, Jesus' self-sacrifice is one of the only ways that we can make sense of the pain and suffering that people experience. See, God here isn't the cause of this pain. God suffers alongside of us. Jesus sacrificed himself, endured all the heartache of being human, and because of that, he's uniquely qualified to talk about and address why we experience pain and heartache, and where is God when people are losing their life, specifically for their faith. So when we get to the 7th royal seal being opened in Revelation chapter 8, it launches a new set of 7, the 7 trumpets being played. And the first set of 7 was about Jesus' followers getting caught up in the destruction of life and sometimes ultimately giving their life because of their faith. The second set of 7, the trumpets that are being played, really address the question of what it's like to suffer without Jesus. So if you come down to the 5th trumpet, we're said that there's a pit that is open, releasing devastating locusts, but they can't harm nature or the followers of Jesus. See, this lets us know that this is telling us all of this second set, these 7 trumpets that are being played, are really what it's like for people who are outside of Christ to suffer. And as a follower of Jesus, we may be tempted sometimes to look at the suffering of people who don't follow Jesus and say, well, good, they're getting what they deserve. But listen to what John in Revelation chapter 10 says about this. When he's proclaiming this prophecy about what's happening to people outside of Christ and their suffering, he says, "It was as sweet as honey in my mouth, but when I had eaten it, my stomach was made bitter." See, it may seem good to watch other people suffer and sometimes even to get what we think they deserve, but ultimately it's bitter. It's not helpful for us. The suffering of other people who were created in God's image is never a good thing. When we get to the final trumpet, the seventh trumpet, we start a new cycle over, and we hear a loud voice from the temple, and the temple opens up. And the seven royal seals were about what it was like to suffer as a follower of Jesus, and the seven trumpets are about what people are like and what they experience when they're suffering apart from Jesus. But this really begins to show us the spiritual battle that's beyond people. It's the difference between good and evil, and God and evil in the world. And in Revelation chapters 12 and 13, you get this picture of a spiritual war that's playing out. And this is going on throughout all of human history, that there are forces of good and forces of evil that really do exist in the world. And then we get to our last set of 7 disturbing and devastating events, the bowls that are being poured out. And these bowls give us yet another perspective. The bowls being poured out, they come from the temple because they are actually God's judgment against evil and injustice and the powers and systems that uphold evil and justice. See, it may be easy for us to look at all the brokenness and all the injustice that exists in the world and be like, God must not have anything to do with the world. But the reality is God wants to address the injustice in the world and has a plan to address the injustice in the world. Once again, when we get to the 5th bowl, we learn a lot about what's going on in this set of events. The 5th bowl of God's judgment is poured out on the beast's throne. In other words, it's poured out against the seat of power of evil in the world. The symbolism from this last set, the 7 bowls that's being poured out, makes a lot of references to the 10 plagues against Egypt from Exodus chapter 7 through 9. If you know the story of Exodus and specifically the 10 plagues from Exodus chapter 7 through 9, you know that God sent Moses and Aaron to stand up against the oppressive Egyptians who were enslaving the people of Israel. And God sent a series of plagues that directly challenged them. And it actually challenged not just the people of Egypt who were being oppressive, but also the things they cared about and the idols they worshiped, the false gods that they served. And when we look through this 7 bowls of God's judgment that are poured out against evil and injustice, it borrows the same language from Exodus, where God is directly challenging the idolatry and the evil and the injustice that exists in our world. I don't know if you're familiar with Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events, but in that story, there's some children, and they experience some pain and some heartache and some loss pretty early on in the story. And they have a sense that a character that they meet, Olaf, is behind it. But they don't really know at the beginning the full depths of the story. And as they begin to uncover more and more about Olaf and about their parents, they understand all of the complexity and all of the injustice and all of the pain and all the heartache and what role Olaf really played in that. In the same way, Revelation is beginning to reveal and show something to us. It shows us that God is not against us, that God is not the cause of the pain and suffering that we experience in the world. Instead, God's the one who suffers alongside of us. And God is ultimately the one who's going to address the injustice and the pain and the evil that exists in the world. That God has a judgment against the systems and powers of oppression and evil that are out there that are causing pain and heartache and injustice in our world. And that God is the one who suffers alongside of us and will ultimately address the injustice. The other thing we see from this is that Revelation isn't showing us a timeline of human history, like a series of things that have to happen. But instead, Revelation is slowly showing us more and more of the spiritual realities behind the pain and suffering that people experience. And it wrestles with the questions like, if God is loving and powerful, why does evil exist? And with each of these cycles through the book of Revelation, each of these sets of 7 devastating events, we're getting more information and a different perspective about how the world works. We've called this series All Things New, and up until this point, you may be looking for something new. I don't know about you, but I'm ready for something new in my life, a change of pace and new experiences, to get out and to just experience life and to try some new things. And we can clearly see as we go through the book of Revelation why people would want a new start, because pain does exist and is real. And as we move toward the end of the book of Revelation, what I want you to know is that God is a loving God who suffers alongside of us, but is also interested in adjusting the injustice that happens in our world. And is calling us to not only welcome in the rebirth of things and the changing of things and the newness of things that God wants to bring in, but also to participate in that right here and right now in our world. And as we think about asking God to make all things new, which God has promised us He's going to do, we also need to be asking ourselves, how can I see where God is already working in the world and make a difference and make new things and rebuild broken things and stand up against the injustices that I see and that I experience? Because God is in the business of making all things new, and God is calling all of us to learn to practice self-sacrifice, to notice where God is moving, and to also make things new in our families, in our friendships, in our neighborhoods, our communities, and around the world, because God is not content with the injustice and the brokenness that we see and experience on a daily basis. He's not unaware of it. He's calling His people to address it.
You turn my tears into laughter, my heart into love ever after. You touch me and I feel like dancing. No, I wanna sing hallelujah, Lord, you make hallelujah, Lord, you make hallelujah. You change my darkness to daylight. You turn what's all wrong to all right. You make my burden seem so light. I feel I can fly. Hallelujah, Lord, you make hallelujah, Lord, you make hallelujah. Lord, you make hallelujah, Lord, you make hallelujah, all things new. I am a new creation. I am a new creation. Behold, everything old is new, thanks to you, Lord. Hallelujah, Lord, you make hallelujah, Lord, you make hallelujah, all things new. Hallelujah, Lord, you make hallelujah, Lord, you make hallelujah, all things new. Hallelujah, Lord, you make hallelujah, Lord, you make hallelujah. took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You have been so, so good to me. And all the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God, and oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. Oh, I couldn't turn it, and I don't deserve it. Still, you give yourself away, and all the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. When I was your foe, still your love fought for me. You have been so, so good to me. When I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. You have been so, so kind to me. And all the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God, and oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. Oh, I couldn't turn it, and I don't deserve it. Still, you give yourself away, and all the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no wall you won't, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no lie you won't take down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. And all the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God, and oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't turn it, and I don't deserve it, but still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God.